Welcome to Inside Creative Minds. I'm your host, Trey Goodman. We have a very interesting show for you this time. We've got David Leibowitz, a creative director of one of the largest ad agencies in town. But first, let's meet Beth Ames Schwartz. She's a phenomenal painter and she has 50 years in the business. Check it out. Well, Beth, welcome to Inside Creative Minds. We're here at Sky Cafe in Mesa, and you are a tremendous artist. 50 years professionally. Do I have that right? 50 years professionally?
That's true.
And we're going to be taking a look at your work today, and we can't even begin to even see a minute amount of it. But we've got, what, 8 books?
Well, about 8 catalogs
Eight
and
catalogs
3 books. We
and
just
3 books.
published the 3rd book, Arizona State University. I did a big project with them that was just finished.
Well, let's talk about your background briefly. What got you started? What made you an artist?
Well, I think I came from a very strict home, authoritarian home, and both my parents were professors, and my mother saw me poking out my doll's eyes, and she said, well, I think maybe we better give her art lessons. And I started when I was very young. In fact, I went to the Art Students League when I was about 12 years old, very famous school, and they put up nude models, and I began to work.
And you just kept on for 50 years?
Well, you know, there are ups and downs in every career, but my first husband courted me with Arizona Highways under his arm. It was a very cold winter in New York, and I showed him 3 paintings of a view from my window, one very realistic, one semi-abstract, and one very abstract. And he came out here and brought me out, and I've been in Arizona on and off ever since. I moved to New York in the 90s because I've been showing in New York quite a bit, and I've shown all over. But I love Arizona. So I guess my work really developed here because of the desert.
Well, how would you describe your work? I mean, it's
a good question. You can't really type my work.
Right.
Basically, my work is about the same thing over and over and over because I work in series, and every series has absolute integrity.
Okay.
And so it's just like if you're beating a heart in China or in Russia or in South America, it's the same heart that we have here. And so my work is really about trying to interpret wisdom systems, and like any wisdom system, any religion, any great master of philosophy or spirituality says the same thing, that all life is sacred. And so whatever project that I've done, and I've done them in quite a bit of depth, I study a lot and then go into the studio and try to forget it.
Wow.
They all say the same thing, that all life is sacred. And although I believe this truly, I don't think we've learned it yet.
Wow.
As a culture, as a species.
Well, what I was so amazed is when we went to your studio, and we're privileged enough to go into your house and see your work. You live amongst your art, and it is amazing work. How does that feel to wake up every morning and you see your artwork's all around you?
Well, it keeps changing because very early on when I moved here, in the late 50s, I was used to beautiful green trees and grass, and it was desert, and I hated it. And so I started painting the landscape and going into the desert, and the work got bigger and more wild, and I would always put it up. And so my walls keep changing as the work changes. Actually, when I really started to love the desert, and you have to do this if you haven't, I went down the Colorado River in a raft. Have you done that?
No, I have not.
It's amazing. I did my first trip in the early 70s, and that's when my work really changed. I had been a pretty traditional watercolorist, and the rocks go back 5 billion years, and I woke up with the sun, and I went to sleep when it sad, and I realized that I didn't want to be another landscape painter. And I had done 3 series, an air series, a water series, an earth series. And when it came to fire, I realized I needed to work with fire as an art form. Now, you know what that is?
No.
Well, I kind of researched all the artists who've worked with fire and had a big show at the Scottsdale Center in 1978. Well, what I did is I started doing this, I call it a process ritual about life, death, and rebirth, because being Jewish, I started to go to Israel at the same time, and I realized that I didn't like the idea of entropy, that everybody just lives and dies. So I called it ordering, disordering, reordering, life, death, and rebirth. So I rolled out the paper, I burned it, which was a form of death.
Okay.
And also, fire has always been a transforming energy source in many spiritual religions. And then I started working with the earth of Arizona.
Right.
I took the earth from the bottom of the Grand Canyon, and then later I went to different countries around the world and worked with earth and fire. And my big project with earth was going to Israel and working at 10 sacred sites.
Now, what year was that? Was that in the 80s? Or?
That was in the early 80s. It opened at the Jewish Museum in New York. That was my second traveling museum exhibition. And the exciting thing about working in Israel was actually bringing back the earth and working with the earth.
So you actually brought it back in boxes? Or?
I would keep sending boxes home of earth.
Wow.
And I actually rolled out the paper at the site. So I was in Jerusalem, and I got special dispensation, not from the Pope, but from whoever was in charge of earth and taking it away.
Wow.
And I worked with the earth, and I went to a lot. I went to the Red Sea, and I honored a woman in history. Because I'm a feminist, I wanted to honor women in history who had made an absolute contribution to their culture.
Well, you know, you had been doing all this work all these years, and unfortunately, I was not aware of it. The first thing I was aware of was when I saw your work, the word in paint, and can you speak to that? I mean, this is amazing stuff.
Well, this was about my fifth big project. I tend to work, as I say, in series and large projects, and this, the second one, after Israel Revisited, just to bring you up to date, was a big installation called The Moving Point of Balance. And Israel Revisited was based on the 10 spheres of energy in the Kabbalistic Tree of Life. A Moving Point of Balance was based on the 7 chakras in the Hindu system. So I work east and west and up and down.
And you give a lot of thought to all this.
Right,
I mean, you put a lot of time and effort
actually,
into this.
it's a lot of study because I'm not airy-fairy. I'm somebody who likes to go into depth. I like to create beauty with depth. And my third big project, I worked with Shen Shi, which is a Chinese healing system, because I had gotten ill, and it was a meditation, and it worked with the idea of that no matter what we go through in life, we can transform it, and that's really the lesson, or the work, and the very essence of the work is all about transformation. And so I discovered these 2 8th century Chinese poets, Du Fu and Li Po. And at the time, I was feeling very helpless about the Iraq War, and felt that I needed to do something. And so I had done a series in the early 90s called A Story for the 11th Hour, about how compassion can save our planet. And it has the Buddha cradling the planet. Well, in this particular project that was actually sponsored by ASU, the College of Public Programs, and the Virginia Piper Center for Creative Writing, they loved the idea that I incorporated these Chinese poets' work from the 8th century into my work. And the poems are all very sad. I mean, they're about war. In the Tang Dynasty, the population was decimated. About 75% of the population disappeared during that dynasty because of wars.
I think it's amazing that you're able to just look at everything globally. I mean, you're in Arizona, but you're not just thinking about painting the Grand Canyon over and over. You know what I mean? You're doing Israel, you're doing
I don't consider myself an Arizona artist, although I love Arizona. It is actually beautiful that you said that, because I really feel there's the idea of the 100 monkey story. Do you know that story?
No, I'm sorry, I don't.
Well, it's the idea if 200,000 people achieve compassion or consciousness or enlightenment, whatever you want to call it, wisdom, maybe
Yeah.
true wisdom, that we'll all get it at that moment. And so I guess my work has always been about asking every single person to look within, because if we heal ourselves, we're bound to heal our planet, because I'll say hello to you and I'll mean it and I'll be loving and I'll keep my heart open to you. But if I'm closed and angry, because there are only really two energies on the planet, love or fear.
Yeah.
And fear turns into, you know what it turns into, violence.
Well, you know what I really enjoyed is that when I went into your studio to get some footage of you working, I'm thinking, you know, you've been doing this for 50 years. This is the old hat to you. But I could just see you walked into the studio and you just lit up and you just started creating, and I could tell it's like you're. I mean, who knows how many more books you're going to create? Who knows more art?
It's my greatest asset and my greatest detriment at the same time, because you can't look at a Beth Ames Schwartz and say, oh my goodness, she's been doing this for 50 years, because the work changes.
Yeah.
Because if I'm studying 8th century Chinese poets, oh my God, the work just happened naturally to become stylized landscapes. They have a visionary quality. When I was doing a Visible Reminders series in the early 2000s, they were abstract because I was interpreting T.S. Eliot poetry, and I was breaking out from an earlier series that was called Shenxi, that was all about very carefully doing these striated boxes of gold leaf that look moment by moment by moment. So it's the philosophy and the study that charges the work.
Yeah.
So
Well,
it's from the inside out, not from the outside in.
And I can just tell how excited you get when you're working. Now, we're almost out of time, but I've got to ask, what are you thinking next? What's your next project?
I don't know. It's like jumping off the bridge and learning to fly on the way down.
Yeah.
My work is a chronicle and also a residue of my life, and sometimes it's 10 years ahead of where I am, so I don't know. Just tune in. And you'll find out.
Well, Beth, we hope we can have you on the show down the road again to see because we only just got to touch just a little bit of your work.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit. But thanks so much for being on the show.
Oh, thank you so much.
Oh, it was a pleasure.
Happy to be here.
Thank you. Well, I thought Beth's work was amazing. But stay tuned for David Leibowitz. He's up next.
Where are you going to show up this weekend? ShowUp.com is your valley-wide connection to theater, music, dance, art, and a whole lot more. The ShowUp.com calendar and discount ticket marketplace has something for everyone. Enjoy a fun activity with family, have a quiet, romantic date, or some exhilarating action with friends. It's fast, it's free, and it's all online at ShowUp.com. So where are you going to show up this weekend? ShowUp.com. It's all you gotta do.
Supporting locally owned businesses is better for the economy, builds unique communities, and preserves the environment. Find out more at localfirstaz.com. Think local, buy local, be local.
Welcome back to ICM. You ever wonder what a creative director does? Well, let's go find out with David Leibowitz. Well, David Leibowitz, welcome to Inside Creative Minds here at Sky Cafe. And
Thanks.
so nice to have you on the show. Now, you're a creative director of a large ad agency here in town.
Sounds fancy, doesn't it?
But what you really are is a storyteller, because people are watching the show and they're like, I remember David Leibowitz from KTAR. Or I remember David
He used
Leibowitz.
to be somebody.
Or I remember him from the Arizona Republic. So just a brief background.
Oh my goodness. Started out as a newspaper columnist.
Right.
Did that for many years, worked with the Tribune, the East Valley, not far from where we're sitting tonight. Transferred over, worked for the Republic for a while. Radio lured me away, went to KTAR, did that for a number of years. Flirted with KFYI for a bit, but then landed this job at Moses Sandshell, where I'm the creative director. So, you know, the consistent theme, you said storytelling, that's been the consistent theme now for really the better part of 15 years. It's kind of finding ways to engage people, kind of reach out and touch people with different stories, just in all different forms.
Well, let's qualify your storytelling abilities a little bit, your education.
Oh, God, yeah. It sounds so much more fancy than it is. I mean, it's just a story of a guy didn't know what he was going to do with his life. So I went undergrad, I got a degree in English, and I thought, well, surely I can get a job teaching or something like that. And it turned out that me standing in front of a classroom of people and boring a bunch of kids was not really for me. So then I went and got a master's in American literature so I could write the great American novel. I don't know if you noticed, but they really won't pay you to do that. So then I went and got a master's in journalism, which actually turned out to be kind of a valid way of life for me. So I really was milking college for 10 years, but it taught me a lot about perseverance and how to earn assistantships and all sorts of ways to go to school for free.
Now, this creative director, where you are now, what is a creative director?
Here's how I explain it. Here's the way I explain it.
Okay.
The creative director, we've got a creative department of really talented people, copywriters and art directors, who come up with the ideas for television commercials and radio spots and print ads and things like that. And their ideas are usually very, very good. But what I do is I come along and I sort of sprinkle a little bit of fairy dust on their ideas and try to make them just a little bit better. So part of my role is leading the team to sort of elevate what it is we're doing, or talking to clients and convincing them, do a lot of writing, do a lot of concepting and things like that. So it's kind of a creative jack of all trades. But really for me, I look at it as shepherding the stories that we tell. So whether our client is the Arizona Office of Tourism or U.S. Airways or Peter Piper Pizza, whatever, it's finding the kinds of stories that people are going to be interested in, that people are going to emotionally, kind of attach to, and then finding a way to kind of push those out into the world.
Now, how do you find that? How different is that from when you were on the air? It was basically Monday through Friday, was it not? Basically,
Monday through
I remember
Friday,
turning the radio
9
on,
to 9.
and Leibowitz is on the air. Here he is again.
I remember that too. I remember it like it was yesterday.
And that had to be a lot different. And then also writing a daily column at the Republic.
Well, yeah, I mean, but again, the consistent strain is like trying to find what people are interested in. I mean, everybody thinks, you do a radio show and you're on there for 3 hours a day, and people think, well, wow, it must be really, really difficult to come up with stuff to talk about. And it's like, no, it isn't. Yeah. It's difficult. Yeah, there's 10,000 things to talk about. The difficulty is getting rid of 9,997 things that are not that interesting. Yeah. And that's where news judgment comes in, and that's where understanding kind of what's top of mind for people. What are Trey and his buddies talking about at the water cooler?
Now, were you allowed then, as the host of the show, to be the creative mind that chose the topic?
Yeah, I mean, it was a collaborative effort between me, the producer of the show. I mean, other people would kind of come up with ideas, but generally, you'd wake up real early in the morning, you'd start reading different newspapers. I'd read 20 or 30 papers from around the country.
Wow.
You'd find stuff you think was interesting, but most of the time, I mean, a lot of it was, I'd be at the gym, I'd be sitting on the exercise bike or something and listening to people talk, and they'd say, well, Sheriff Arpaio, that guy drives me crazy. And you realize how wound up people get about certain topics, whether it's, Slumdog Millionaire is not really as good a film as people think it is, or, photo radar is a horrible thing. And when you're able to kind of figure out that that's what people are interested in, well, that's what you should be talking about. And,
do you miss being in the mix?
I miss it like on a big day with a humongous news story.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be kind of fun, but I mean, right now, if you turn on talk radio, guarantee you somebody's talking about mortgage meltdown, homes in foreclosure, the economy's in the tank. I don't want to talk about that every day.
Right.
I mean, it just honestly, the thing about talk radio is, how do I put this diplomatically? I'm really not very diplomatic. The thing about it is that really, it's repetitive, and it's made for a very narrow niche of people who really want their kind of world reaffirmed day after day after day after day. And I don't miss that part of it. I mean, I do think that there were really cool listeners, really cool colleagues, and that part of it's fun, but there's a lot of fun in what I do now too.
Well, let's talk about that. What's the highlight that you've had since you left radio and went into being a creative director? And what did you realize that you didn't really know it was going to be? And you're like, wow, that's kind of cool.
There's so much stuff. I mean, to me, first of all, you work you do the radio thing. You sit in a glassed-in, soundproof room for 3 hours a day. You don't really talk to people except through a microphone. So everything's mediated. All your experience is mediated. Well, now I work with 50 people. And every day we have to work together and figure out a way to negotiate our egos and our ideas and kind of come together as a team, sell stuff to clients.
So it was a singular deal, also with the newspaper as well, right? It was just
sure. I mean, you're writing a story, and while you fly to Columbine, you're standing outside that school, you're talking to people, and you're trying to process this whirlwind of information and trying to bring it home for people. But at the end of the day, it's just you.
And so now you're working with a team.
Well, now you have all these people, and there's this constant negotiation of, Trey has an idea, he thinks it's a good idea. Well, I think I can make your idea better, but before I can do that, I have to actually convince you to trust me.
So how did that go? How was
horribly. I mean, nobody wants to hear your opinion about that stuff, so it's very, very difficult. So just getting the hang of that is a big thing. And then also, I mean, there's a huge kick. I mean, I'm sure, when you have the idea for a show, when anybody has the idea for any kind of a project, and no matter how creative it is, but when you jot down that note and you say, I think that'd be really cool if we did that. When you're able to take it from that raw idea, that thing that you wrote on a note, I jotted on the back of a napkin, and then see that actually become a finished, kind of work of art. I mean, that's amazing to me. And that never loses, it's never dull. I remember the first time I ever saw, a story I wrote in the newspaper. And I remember, the first time I ever did a radio show and then went home and, somebody came up to me and said, I heard you on the radio, you sounded kind of like a moron. But I mean, it was out there in the world, and I still, I'm watching the Suns game and I see a commercial that we did or something like that. And I just think like, wow, I was there, I did that. I was part of that anyway, and that's a great feeling.
Well, what keeps you creative?
I have a mortgage, and that's very important. No, I mean there's a lot of different things. I mean, part of it is I have a tremendous thirst for creative input from other people. I love music, I love books, I love art. I like to kind of consume all that stuff. And kind of constantly be taking it in and taking it in and taking it in. I love popular culture, and in the advertising world, that kind of really is currency.
That's huge.
So that's a big part of it. And the other thing too is I've gotten more into things like meditation. I love reading about psychology, and to me, all of that, taking in all that information, allows you a chance to sort of sit down, sift through it all, and come up with something that feels unique.
Well, what advice? It sounds like you're a Renaissance man, basically. I mean, what advice would you have for someone who says, "Hey, I want to be a creative director at an ad agency"? I mean, I think when I grow up, I want to have that job too. I mean, that sounds pretty cool.
I think it's a great job. My advice is simply to keep your eyes open, experience the world as fully as you possibly can. Because my big advantage has been I've been able to do a lot of different things.
It sounds like it. Yeah.
And that has accrued into a lot of different experiences. And so when you put aside some of the educational stuff that you might not have, like I didn't go to art school, and that can be a disadvantage in what I do. But when I can think about the things that I can do, the stuff I have seen, the language skills I do have, and I can make it my own playing field, then all those weaknesses kind of go away and they become strengths. And I think that's important. You have your own sort of set of skills, and even though you have to be very comfortable playing in a world that feels a little foreign, every once in a while it's nice to kind of say, well, here's what I do know, and kind of play in that world too.
Why do you have to tell stories?
Ever since I was a little kid, it's funny, my therapist would tell you that I'm really annoying because I have this tremendous driving need to be understood. If you said to me, well, hey, it's 8:02 or something like that, and I would say, well, it's 8:01 and 52 seconds. And we would sit there and go back and forth and back and forth. And I think that's where the storytelling comes from. It's not good enough for me to say, we kind of went east. I really want you to know that we went east by southeast, and I want you to know what time we got there and what it smelled like along the way.
If you couldn't be creative and you couldn't, tell stories, you can't write, you can't do your radio show anymore, and you can't be this creative director, what are you going to do?
Die? No, I can't fathom that, because all the things that I do as part of my professional life, I do as part of my personal life as well. So if I didn't do this to get paid, I would do it anyway.
Now, your boss may hear that.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't do it for him. No, but I mean, it's the way I relate to the world.
Yeah.
I find it's almost like things didn't really happen unless I write them down and decipher them that way. Wow. Unless I'm able to process it that way, unless I can write it in my journal, think about it, noodle around with it. I mean, that's kind of my way of understanding the world. Some people like to take pictures, some people like to make drawings. I like to kind of record things and think about them that way. So I think I'll always do that.
Well, you certainly had a progression. Where are you going next?
Maybe a regression is what it comes
Where
down
are
to.
you heading to next?
I've never planned any of this,
No?
so I don't really know. I mean, sometimes I think, well, I like to be more of an entrepreneur, could I do this on my own instead of working for the man or something like that? I mean, I don't know. I mean, I want to write a book one day. One of these days I like to go into the bookstore and, somewhere in between like John le Carre and Ursula Le Guin, somewhere in the LEs or something, I'd like to see something with my name on it. I would feel then that was the fulfillment of some lifelong dream. So I think I like to do that. The problem is this butt and this chair need to stick together for a long enough amount of time to do that, and that's very difficult for me.
Well, even if you just did a story about your life, it sounds like it'd be interesting. I mean, and all the other stories that you have, I'm sure.
Yeah, but
you
it has to be more than a couple of pages. This is the thing.
Well, it's been so tremendous to have you on the show. I listened to you for years, and it's so cool to finally be sitting right here and talking to you. So thanks so much for being on the show.
You're very welcome.
Man.
It's a pleasure.
Oh, thank you.
Absolutely a pleasure.
Well, that's our show, and I hope you enjoyed it. Hey, if you want to learn more about Beth or David, you know where to go, InsideCreativeMinds.com. Until next time.